you all to this, our flagship webinar, which we are organizing on role of electricity regulators in decarbonizing of the power sector. This is probably the most desired subject, and we are grateful that Mr. Rakesh Nath took personal interest to organize this webinar. India Energy Forum has been organizing the webinar after the COVID effect. And since September 2020, this is the 30th webinar we are organizing on various verticals of the energy sector. During this financial year, this is the third one. We are honored with the presence of Mr. Pujari, Mr. P.K. Pujari, Chairman CRC and former Secretary, Ministry of Power. We are also honored with the presence of Thiru Chandrasekharan, Chairman, Tamil Nadu Electricity Regulatory Commission. The other speakers, Mr. Segal, I think he has joined, and Dr. Rahul. India has set up a very ambitious target for decarbonization. The task is difficult, but achievable. Decarbonization is required to be pursued by reducing carbon footprints in generation and consumption of electricity. We will have the opportunity to enrich our knowledge from the presentations by all the speakers who are participating in this webinar. Let me now say some few words about the India Energy Forum. India Energy Forum was set up in 2001. It's a registered society, NGO, and it's an association of think tank. We have over 100 members belonging on various segments of energy sector, highly experienced and having rich experience. That is why we say that it's a club of think tank. We have completed 20 years of our operations. We celebrated our 20th anniversary in June 2021. The vision of India Energy Forum is to contribute effectively for development of sustainable energy security in India. The objectives are serve as an independent advocate. We are a non-profit organization, NGO registered with the National Societies. Our aim is not to make any profit. We run our association from the contribution by various organizations and sponsorship of the events which we organize. We have been organizing before the COVID physical events on each segment of the energy sector. We were also organizing Urja Vach program, where we were inviting the experts to give topic on particular subject. India Energy Forum is bringing out a publication called Total Energy every second month. This publication covers all the news related to energy, plus covers the papers given by our experts and also proceedings of the webinars which we are organizing. With these few words, introducing the India Energy Forum, which I said we are 20 years old organization. We are closely working with other organizations. We have MOU with International Solar Alliance to jointly promote the solar energy world over. This MOU has been signed by both the organizations. Mr. Sahi signed on behalf of India Energy Forum. Mr. Mathur Sain on behalf of International Solar Alliance. May I now welcoming you all again. We are 53 participants. Welcome you all again to this webinar. May I now request Mr. Rakesh Nath, Chairman of the Vertical and Regulators in Indian Energy Forum, to please introduce the theme and the speakers. Mr. Rakesh Nath, please.
Good morning, everyone. As Mr. Bhamani has said, India has set up very ambitious targets for decarbonization. But I feel that if we have conducive and progressive policies and regulations in place, the task can be achieved. Important role in reducing the carbon footprint in the power sector has to be pursued in demand as well as supply side. Grid is required to be made more resilient and flexible to facilitate integration of renewable energy and minimizing the adverse impact of the disruptive events caused by natural disasters and extreme weather conditions as a result of climate change, and to ensure economic operation of the grid without affecting reliability of supply. I had earlier circulated a paper flagging the main issues. I am briefly going to mention the points to start the discussion. The first point is the resource adequacy planning. Resource adequacy is the ability of a system to meet the consumer demand round the clock all the time of the years, 8760 hours, subject to the specified reliability standards. Traditionally, we have been doing resource adequacy planning based on the peak load and energy requirement of a system. But with the increase of share of renewable energy, a very detailed resource adequacy planning has to be done. And it has become now a complex problem for which you require very sophisticated programs. I feel that all DISCOMs have to prepare a rolling 5-year and perspective resource adequacy plan and 1-year firm plan for the targeted decarbonization level and get the approval of the regulator. For this, I think necessary regulations are required to be framed by the state regulators. DISCOMs have to also tie up resources, including the energy storage, according to the approved resource adequacy plan. DISCOMs have to also be equipped with the necessary hardware and software tools required for this sophisticated study, which will give the optimal requirement of the resources at the desired decarbonization level. And it will also tell you the average cost of generation for the system for different levels of decarbonization. And that will help to take an optimal decision. The Indian Electricity Grid Code and the State Grid Code were made more than a decade back and are required to be revised to meet the future challenges arising from the energy transition. GNA regulations draft was circulated recently. I think they are going to be notified soon by CERC. And I think this will provide greater flexibility to distribution licensees to schedule their power, irrespective of the duration of the contract, whether long-term, medium-term, or short-term. The transmission planning code has to be revised to ensure the development of the transmission system for the economic operation, because I think GNA requires a different philosophy. And accordingly, the interstate transmission planning code has also to be, interstate transmission code has also to be revised. We have a target of 500 gigawatt non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030, and that would require 35 to 40 gigawatt non-fossil capacity to be added every year. The task cannot be achieved without the development of the distributed renewable energy capacity in a big way. The cost of supply in the rural area is, I think, 6 to 7 rupees in different distribution companies. The distributed RE connected to the rural sub-transmission and distribution system will help in reducing the cost of supply and improve the reliability of supply in rural area. Employment generation, it will also provide in rural area. And I think this is going to greatly help, and we should target at least 25% energy consumption in rural area in next 4 to 5 years. The compliance of RPO has to be enforced. The fungibility of various buckets of RPOs may provide greater flexibility to the distribution licensee to meet their RPOs, which may be considered by the regulators. Deliberations are also required on the introduction of new market products for development of renewable energy, like virtual PPAs, contract for difference, capacity market. The ancillary services regulations have been notified, and the ancillary services market is evolving. Automatic generation control has been commissioned to work to provide the secondary support to the grid to be operated by the RLDCs and NLDC. I think similar action is needed for the intrastate stations to be operated, where AGC is to be operated by state load dispatch centers, with a view to minimize their area control error, so to maintain their drawl within their schedule. The technical minimum of thermal projects have been specified by CERC as 55%, and the proper compensatory mechanism to take care of the loss of efficiency of thermal plant due to backing down has also been provided. And this has provided a lot of flexibility to the grid. I think similar action is required for the intrastate generating stations, and similar regulations are to be introduced there. We also need to have aggregators for demand response by the consumers, which will enable the consumers to participate in the ancillary services market. The CEA report on the resource optimization 2029-30 indicates the requirement of 108,000 megawatt hours of battery storage and 10,000 megawatt of pump storage. I think immediate action is required, and we have to start the action right now to have the desired sources, which will require very badly in the next 2 to 3 years. Concern has been raised about the treatment of the energy drawn through open access by pump storage and energy storage or electrolyzer for production of hydrogen, whether surcharge will be levied on such drawl. Some time back, I think some regulatory commission has taken that view. In my view, surcharge is not leviable, because surcharge is according to the Electricity Act levied on the consumer, where consumer draws power through open access for his own use. A pump storage and battery storage cannot be treated as a consumer, as they are not drawing energy for own use. The energy drawn by storage device is used for conversion from electrical energy to another source of energy, like gravitational potential energy or chemical energy, which is stored and again reproduced when needed by the grid. So when more than one interpretation of a statute is possible, the regulator, I think, should adopt the interpretation which will remedy and suppress the mischief, and a construction that causes hardship, inconvenience, I think should be ignored. I am, however, not very sure the drawl by a electrolyzer for production of hydrogen for use in industry or a transport will be treated, because that will be used for own use. And I think a special dispensation is required, because if open access charges surcharge are imposed, then they will not be workable. In order to reduce emission from coal-fired plants, carbon capture and storage, sequestration, and use of derivatives of green hydrogen, namely methanol and green ammonia, to displace coal in boiler is required to be encouraged by framing necessary regulations. And I've been informed that 20% displacement of coal is already on cards in Adani's Mundra plant. The decarbonization will also be supported with reduction of AT&C losses and improvement in reliability of supply to consumers who use DG sets and inefficient inverters as backup supply. The enforcement of SAIDI and SAFE standards, I think, has to be imposed by regulators. And to start with, I think the measurement at the feeder level, because at the consumer level, measurements will become very cumbersome and difficult, and we don't have the data support. At least at the feeder level, it can be done. And in case the supply standards are not followed, then penalties may be imposed by on the distribution company. The public charging stations are going to increase in near future, and we have to have TOD tariff at average cost of supply for public charging station. And we may also encourage open access of green power by public charging stations. Recent IPCC report on mitigating climate change has highlighted the scope for demand side intervention involving deployment of energy efficient initiatives and demand response systems at customer end. Both these components can contribute towards peak load shaving and achieve load generation balance by curtailing fossil fuel generation. Regulatory design of well-differentiated time of day tariff will help to enable retail customers' participation in the voluntary load shifting or in interruptible load program. To encourage DISCOMs to participate in DSM measures, regulatory dispensation may be necessary for recovery of program expenses and to make up for the revenue lost. These are some few points I wanted to highlight. Thank you very much. And I think we have in our panel Mr. P.K. Pujari, Chairman CERC, who will be inaugurating this session. Mr. M. Chandrasekharan, Chairman Tamil Nadu Electricity Commission. Mr. Y.K. Sehgal, Executive Director, Greenco Group, and Dr. Rahul Valavalkar, President, India Energy Storage Alliance. May I now request Mr. Bhamani to take over and take it forward.
Thank you, Mr. Rakesh. You have very elaborately mentioned the points relating to the subject. May I now request our President, Mr. R.V. Sahi, to please deliver the presidential address.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And thanks, Rakesh, for a very good introductory address as the chairman of this vertical. I am thankful to Mr. Pujari, who just a couple of weeks back, we had another program and he was the chief guest. And now this is the program on a very important issue. In fact, India Energy Forum did not have this vertical as an exclusive focus because we have added in last 1 year a couple of new verticals to give a little more stress and emphasis on some of these subjects. And this subject was being discussed, no doubt, but we thought that an exclusive vertical, and I approached Rakesh and he readily agreed to chair this vertical with Mr. Singh as the convener of this vertical. And I think this program itself indicates how much is needed to be discussed through such forums and such discussions, even on issues which pertain to the regulatory commissions of the states and the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. And I'm thankful to all the speakers who responded to the suggestion and request made by Rakesh Nath to participate and prepare for discussion on the subject. I think my understanding of the Regulatory Commission's role is quite simple, that regulators have much bigger role in shaping the structure, shaping the norms, shaping the regulation of the entire power sector. And by regulator, I mean regulators as well as their appellate tribunals It is not that these issues have not been discussed in the past and have not been attended to. They have been, but by and large, the general perception is that regulatory commissions have focused more on tariff-related matters, and some such developmental issues have, of course, been uh, uh, mentioned, have all been discussed. But then, as Rakesh Nath was just trying to elaborate, that the way things are happening and have been happening in last 5-6 years, particularly on the energy scene, one has to see whether the response has to be faster, response has to be quicker and deeper, and maybe even subjects which have not been covered so far, but they do come on the overall development of the sector need to be brought in. Of course, we have different agencies. We have Central Electricity Authority, which has the role of Ministry of Power, has a role, the Department of Energy of different state governments have a role. But I think regulators do have an overarching role in how the electricity industry functions, and in the larger interest of economic development, in the larger interest of course, the consumers, and now, of course, on the issue of decarbonization. Now, that exclusive focus will make all the difference. Of course, we are talking at a time when we are trying to focus on decarbonization, and this month, last month, and even now has been so tough, and the crisis has been so deep that the more we try to avoid coal, the more we are getting into coal. So coal is not available here, coal is not available from import sources, but if it is available, it is very high cost. So we want to reduce, but we want to increase. Both are conflicting requirements. We have to have power, demand has increased, and therefore we go in there. And the pace at which we wanted to add solar, perhaps that pace has not fully been in line with our thought. And as a result, we do have difficulty. So, but that is true. That is true for any developmental activities, that you will not have only pluses and not minuses. We have to balance the two. And this role of reducing carbon footprint in Indian power sector profile is an enormous role. But till 2050, I made a point and I wrote a piece. I do not see that power generation through coal sources in terms of absolute value till 2050 is going to reduce, though proportion of power from coal sources will reduce. In my calculation, presents 70% proportion of coal-based power generation. Even if they reduce to 30% by 2040 or 2050, still the absolute value of billion units will be much more than it is today. And it is in that context that one has to see how best we do the generation even through coal process so that it is most efficient. Are we generating power where heat rate is something like 3000 and sort of not allowing something where the heat rate can be in the range of 2200? Are we closing down our power plants which are in that range of 2800 to 3000 heat rate, or we are not? So these are some of the processes. The question is what role the regulators have. I think they do have a role. They do have a role for coordinating with various agencies to see that the overall impact of power development program is not only looked at from the point of economics or tariff, but they have to be looked upon also from the point of view of carbon footprint. Now that is one issue. As I said, I'm not saying that has not been at all attended to, but with the focus and with the thrust that it needs to be attended to, that yes, decarbonization is also on the agenda. And linked to decarbonization, what all needs to be done, what regulation has to be changed in transmission side, in distribution side, and distribution side. Even now, we have states and we have cities in India where losses are in the range of AT&C losses are in the range of 30%, 35%, 40%. And obviously, we have technical losses of higher order in rural areas. Now, why the response time needs to be a little faster than it has been, and not only, let me underline, not only by regulatory institutions, but by all institutions which are associated, because dynamics have changed. and the speed at which things are happening have changed. Take, for example, emergence of solar. How best it could have been that by now, entire rural area, rural agriculture and rural electricity supply is through decentralized solar distributed generation, in which case this huge transmission lines, huge distribution lines that we need to do, and we are not able to control, and because of that, the losses are very high. As Rakesh just now said, that decarbonization is not an issue only of generation side, but is also of demand, is also of consumption side. Of course, in generation itself, a lot more needs to be done. The other day we were discussing in some other context whether the merit order dispatch has an angle, has an orientation on heat rate, or it doesn't have. Because merit order is only on economics today. So that means if a power station produces power with variable cost of less than certain figure, it merits to be dispatched, even though the heat rate of that power station may be in the range of 2,800 or 3,000. And is there a contradiction, or are there some deeper analyses that are required to be done? So these are the issues. The norms have to be viewed, and I wouldn't say that they have to be viewed only from the point of view of decarbonization or carbon emission footprint, but also from the point of view overall thing. Because there, one angle that could happen is that even though the variable cost is less because of transportation cost being less, but then if the transportation is huge, there also you have a carbon footprint. If transportation is for 1,000, 2,000 kilometers, thereby makes the cost higher, you do have to take that into account. So it becomes a little more complex exercise of doing it, but it is worth doing it. Are we doing it? Or we have become too simplistic on the merit order dispatch. Merit order dispatch formulation, merit order dispatch approach needs to revisit, and that is not to say that the present thing I'm saying is wrong. It is just to say, look back and see whether all these angles, including the angle of carbon footprint, has been attended to or has not been attended to. So the focus needs to change in transmission, needs to change in distribution, need to change in energy efficiency. We set up Bureau of Energy Efficiency, but don't leave everything to Bureau of Energy Efficiency. There are different wings to do and attend to various responsibilities that have been given to them. But as I said, an overarching expectation, an overarching demand from the regulatory institution is from the point of view of this institution being a quasi-judicial body, and a lot of hope and a lot of expectation has been put into the formulations that have gone into the Electricity Act and electricity rules. A lot has been done, let me say in the final point. It is not that not much has been done, although Rakesh pointed out a number of suggestions, but a lot more needs to be done. And that is the reason that we thought, let's focus on this subject, which is so contemporary and which is so essential. And expectation in coming days and months will be much more from the regulatory institutions at the central level and at the state level. Thank you very much. I will come back again during the question answer and the summing up. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sai. You have very elaborately again laid down the points, what Mr. Rakesh Nath has mentioned. And I think it's a good debate, because you normally hear from people, from many experts, that the regulators have not given their role. But that is not a correct think process. The regulators have played a very important role, and we need regulators in every vertical of energy, like coal. I think it's high time that the regulator is appointed for coal, so that many of the issues can be addressed. Thank you very much. May I now, I have the pleasure and honor to invite Shri P.K. Pujari, Chairman CERC and former Secretary Ministry of Power, to please give inaugural address. Shri P.K. Pujari Sahab.
Thank you, and good morning to all of you. And thanks, Mr. Rakesh Nath and Mr. Sahi. You not only have set the context, but also highlighted that the issues are not as simple and visible. Let's say a complex subject, and there are trade-offs needs to be worked out at every stage. Also, I extend my pleasure to see many of my colleagues and friends the webinar today. So, good morning to all of you, and I'd like to thank India Energy Forum for inviting me to share my thought. As I mentioned, since the context has been already placed and the issues have been flagged and broad contours has been laid down, I like to respond broadly to some of the issues that I think for policymakers and regulators is important. And also I like to respond to some of the issues that Mr. Rakesh Nath has flagged and Mr. Sahi has flagged. Obviously, we all agree that India has set up, as was mentioned by Mr. Rakesh Nath, has set up a very, very ambitious target for decarbonization. And it is, as rightly mentioned, it needs to be pursued by reducing the carbon footprint in generation supply side and consumption electricity demand side. So both supply side and demand side are important. It's not that simply you replace the thermal generation with solar or renewable generations, the issues are solved. No, it doesn't happen like that. A lot of supply side issues also are there. So thus it is part of, if you look at overall, it is a subset of the clean energy transition. Decarbonization is one part of the clean energy transition. And India shift from predominantly fossil fuel system energy production and consumption, including oil, natural gas, and imported crude because of the transportations, to renewable energy sources like wind and solar and other contemporary sources. So, having said so, you all agree that yes, there is a need for increasing penetration of renewable energy into the supply mix, and that is the key driver. One of the key drivers, not only the key driver, but one of the key drivers of decarbonization. There are issues involved. So, how do we address those issues? So, in this context, there are two issues that was very rightly brought out by Mr. Rakesh Nath. One is there is a need for consistency of policy and regulatory decisions over time so that stakeholders are able to anticipate and take correct, appropriate decisions, both in terms of investment and putting money. So there is a need for a regulatory and policy certainty. Second, also was pointed out by Mr. Rakesh Nath very clearly that since more and more renewable will be coming to the grid, there is a need to make the grid resilient and flexible so as to enable this integration of increasing variable energy resources and minimize the impact. And for that, a lot of policy issues and regulatory frameworks or policy frameworks are need to be placed. And this is ongoing activities. A lot of issues have been addressed, and still there are several issues which the work is in progress. So I tend to agree with the remarks that Mr. Sahi made, that yes, not many things have happened, a lot of things have happened, but then the sector is so dynamic and things change so fast that we need to respond to those things that is happening so quickly. And obviously, being the system that we are in, very frequently our response takes time, and we need most of the time it comes as a reaction to the certain things that is happening instead of anticipating and putting in place in future. So we need to be, the discussion and webinar like this are important in that context, that yes, in many cases we know that we need to react to certain things that has happened, but also we can anticipate and put a roadmap for ourselves, saying that yeah, these are the certain things, agreed things that need to be done. Then probably we can work out and put those frameworks upfront. And especially in the electricity sector, which unlike the petroleum and coal sector, which is a government of India driven, electricity sector is in a federal structure. So anything that needs to be done, needs to be debated, and a lot of stakeholders needs to be convinced, and they have to be carried along. Otherwise, simple decision, not much of a consultations or being debated, you take. May be happy that you have taken the decision, but doesn't get implemented. It has other issues. So the working structure in or the methodology in power sector needs to be slightly different. So it has to be more interactive, and that requires a lot of effort to be put in place, and a lot of pain points that come up needs to be addressed. So these are the slightly different issues that we need to look at in the power sector. In this context, the point that was made earlier in a broad conceptual framework, whole thing boils down to three conflicting challenges that we have. I mean, the efficiency point was raised, effective cost issue was raised, and there are environmental impact issues were raised. So if you look at it, all boils down to some conflicting challenges which we need to address as a regulator and policy. So one is ensuring energy security, then providing energy equity, access to affordable and clean energy, and also achieving environmental sustainability or decarbonization. So these are three broad issues that we always, at every point, it stares at us. And they are not always in harmonized way they function. Sometimes they bring conflict challenges, as was pointed out by Mr. Sahi very clearly. So those challenges and conflicts need to be addressed. And sometimes it becomes economic and efficiency versus environment. So how do address those issues? I mean, it is a challenge for the regulator and the policy, and that's why the dilemma comes in. So as was pointed out, we are traditionally coal dominated, and so it is for us probably it is the best source of source to be used for in terms of affordability. But anyway, it is as generally been accepted in not very environmentally sustainable issue. So we need to replace. You need to what extent you need to replace, at what pace you need to replace, and so these are the issues. Because everything has an impact on the cost, and then it gets passed on to the consumer, and how much you load to the consumer, and how much subsidy you can give, and how much the state can afford to give subsidy. So these are the issues. So we need to, having accepted that yes, there is a need to replace it, but at what pace and at what quantum, we need to work out a roadmap. Unfortunately, I'm a part of that, but it doesn't happen now. Suddenly, the policy is declared saying that so much of gigawatt by so and so date, and then unilateral way we move towards achieving those particular target. Now it has implications for other existing assets and other things. Those, what are the impact? What are the cost implications? How do we apportion this cost? Should we pass on to the consumers? Should part be absorbed by the utilities? Should part be absorbed by the government of India? Those are some, unfortunately, are never debated, at least in the public forum, and the views are not taken. So when you start implementing those policy targets, in the process of implementation, the issues do come up, and you try to solve those issues. It creates two more. Basically, it is on the spot. You start solving it. It creates more other problems. So we need to really debate purely. I mean, what is the roadmap that you are looking at? If you are going to have 450 gigawatt of renewables, say 2030, what is that impact on all the aspects of this sector? And then who bears? I mean, nothing is free. I mean, everything has a cost. Society has a cost. How do we apportion this cost to various stakeholders? Who bears the cost? I mean, that in that clear terms are not available anyway. I mean, so somebody has to look at and do it. So that's one part. So what I was pointing out is that we do move towards decarbonizations. Yes, that is our commitment nationally, and nationally we have committed that we will move towards higher decarbonization. But as I said, that it is not a trade-off either this or that. It's a challenge to strike that fine balance at what pace we do and how we apportion the cost. So, but good thing is the new technologies that has come up because of the economic of scale and technological innovation, the cost has come down. So it has given us a leeway to implement the decarbonizations, that the likely cost impact has also reduced. But it has, I just pointed out rightly, it has other issues, legal and historical baggage issues, which also needs to be addressed. We have been talking about it for long now, but many of the issues are not yet solved because we don't have a solution how to go about it. So So that's the biggest challenge in the whole framework. Conceptually, nobody has any issue. Yes, the target is right, the objective is correct. It is a question of implementing and then seeing how the cost of transition is percent amongst various stakeholders, and the system doesn't get disturbed in the process of the transition. So, as was also pointed out, that we need to look at alternative energy sources like new fuels, liquid biofuels, hydrogen, and also energy efficiency, demand side responses. I mean, these are also the options, various options. There are for in our power sector, it's still at the very early stage. Battery is very early stages. So we need to understand and put in place the required regulations. We have taken steps in some issues, some areas, but as I said, that we need to understand very clearly and make it these resources. We need to highlight and make sure that the state regulators also put in the framework required to encourage these resources to come to the market. I fully agree with some of the points that Mr. Rakesh Nath pointed out. What are the things that we require? I do not want to add to any of those points, which I know will be discussed in the technical session. But I like to respond that I fully agree that the resource adequacy planning is a key element, and in fact, in the FOR, Forum of Regulators, there is a subgroup working with or resource adequacy for agreed principles, so that all the state regulators generally have a framework in place based on which they can sort of take out their respective state regulation and then mandate the DISCOMs have the resource adequacy. And we considering that also in the draft grid code that is we are framing, I think we will have a full section on chapter on resource adequacy, because but as I said earlier, this will be more into a recommendatory part, because state commission needs to work on that. But that's why parallelly in the FOR also we are working so that there is an agreement at the state regulator level saying that yes, this is an important area which needs to be worked on. That's what the draft grid code will be probably try to put in the public domain in the current month itself, and which will, as you rightly pointed out, needs to address a lot of issues that has evolved between 2010 and 2020. New issues are there, and we need to be slightly more futuristic because we know precisely what is going to at least come in the next step in the short and medium term. So at least those issues that we know that is going to be there, we need to address in the current. So we will be out with that draft fully in the current month. GNA regulations have been finalized. It has not been made effective, but it has been finalized. So it probably will clear a lot of issues about access and connectivity. Market development product is an ongoing process. And then if you look at the state, the CRC has been intervening and allowing products to come in the market. And GNM has come at contract will also come. So it is evolving, and we hopeful that the market will play a key role, and whatever is required facilitate the development of the market. CRC is quite proactively following it. Ancillary services has been notified. It has not become, in fact, not become effective, but the ancillary services do provide a lot of scope for battery and demand side response and other issues in grid code. Also, we are putting those points. So hopefully, it will give some impetus to the services. Also, it will be essential in their own way to help us decarbonize the system. We are ancillary service regulations are now we will has already been analyzed and grid code will be done. We'll also try to bring in whatever best we can do for encouraging the battery storage and other storage, and also e-mobility aspect. So things things are moving, and we're trying to address some of the issues that do come up for us. I am sure that in isolation they look a small component, the whole thing, but if you put the whole picture together, probably we are doing our best to put a framework which are consistent with the objective of decarbonization and decarbonizing the economy, and moving forward in the direction. And I'm sure that since also we are interacting with the forum regulators, state regulators, they are also with us. And as I mentioned earlier, for this sector, we need to talk and take everybody along. So we do believe in that, and that's why this dialogue is on. And whatever framework that we need to put in overarching manner in a grid code, as far as the state commissions are concerned, we have a tacit understanding that yes, it is fine and acceptable to them, and so that the objective that we mention in the various regulations grid code get implemented instead of getting debated and not getting implemented. So that's the backhand work doing. So thank you so much, and I'm sure that many other suggestions and points that will come up will help us in taking decisions at the regulatory level. A lot of state regulators are also there, and then experts, all are experts in the field. So looking forward to your suggestions. I'm sure together we can take right decisions to move and achieve our objectives. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Pujari, for illuminating the role of the regulators and the work being done there, and the program of bringing out these reports. As we said, role of electricity regulator has been very important, and that is probably the responsible for any improvements which we have achieved at this stage. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for accepting our request to inaugurate and be the chief guest. The second time we have the pleasure of meeting you in the recent time. Thank you very much, Mr. Pujari. May I now move further and invite Thiru Chandrasekhar, Chairman, Tamil Nadu Electricity Regulatory Commission, to please give his address.
Decarbonization, role of electricity regulator in decarbonization of power sector. How to achieve decarbonization? It is only through RE resources. We have to encourage RE resources. What Tamil Nadu has done is we have a highest wind generation capacity. Solar capacity is also in the order of 5,000 megawatts. How Tamil Nadu achieved this kind of wind potential, this I would like to tell. It is because of the policies that the Regulatory Commission has adopted. Tamil Nadu is having 8,606 megawatt of wind generation capacity. Initially, we had a policy of allowing banking for the windmills. Recently, what happened? Before 3 years, for the new windmills, the banking was stopped. So because of banking was stopped for new mills, the capacities are not created. After for the past 3 years, the capacity addition started reducing. So why we have introduced, we have stopped the banking, that we have to see. That is because the DISCOMs reported that they are incurring huge losses because most of the industries are going to open access. Open access in this state is provided even without any limit, not even one. Less than a megawatt HT consumers can also go to, again, all HT consumers can avail the open access facility. So every spinning mills, what they do, they go for all the industries, what they have done, they have gone for a windmill by availing. There was a scheme like textile upgradation fund available. So everybody went, all spinning mills went for a windmill, and a lot of windmill capacity have been created in the state. So we need to encourage windmills and solar. Windmills can be encouraged only by providing banking facilities again. That is what is our feeling now. If you provide banking facilities, the DISCOMs may be losing some amount because during wind season, the power is available cheap. They produce and store it in the grid. They take and the power is costly. So to address that problem, we need to give some compensation by wheeling charges, increasing the wheeling charges, bringing in some charges like renewable integration charges. So if every unit produced under windmill, if 1 rupee or 1 rupee 25 paise is given to the DISCOM as a compensation towards it, by way of wheeling charges, by way of additional surcharge or something like that, then there may not be any problem for the DISCOMs also. At the same time, these people will, a lot of investments will come in windmill also. So that is what we are planning. We want another wheeling charges, which are now in the range of 20 paise, we are planning to increase to around 80 paise or 90 paise, so that they will get some compensation. DISCOMs will get some compensation. At the same time, many projects will come up. Tamil Nadu has the potential of another nearly 20,000 megawatt of wind potential is still available. Investors are ready to go for it, but without banking, they don't want to go for it. That is a problem. So we need to have policies like that, so that both the parties are not affected or benefited. So we are planning in the direction. Another one is solar. Solar already we have in Tamil Nadu we have a capacity of 5,000 megawatt. 5,000 we have reached 5,000 megawatt. Mostly captive generators, they go for this. At present they have a banking facility of 1 month. They can generate power during daytime. They can use it throughout the day. So that facility need to be there, so that they can, if their load is 1 megawatt, they will go for a 5 megawatt plant, solar plant. They will generate power during daytime, take the power during all other periods, even peak hour or evening, night hours, every time. That is what is happening now. So many industries have gone for wind and solar. Entire requirement of power, captive power, as almost they have tied up with the renewable sources. The problem now is everybody is going to open access and the DISCOM is losing. So we wanted to give some compensation to DISCOMs. So we have recently, what we have done is we have introduced, we have made a regulation, grid interactive solar system regulation we have made. In that we have introduced a charge called network charges. So the people who are going for a rooftop, any LT industry or HT industry or anybody can go for a rooftop, but they have to pay network charges. That is, industries have to pay, HT industries 86 paise we have fixed. For every unit generated, they need to pay 86 paise. The benefit for the HT consumers, no, their energy charges is rupee 35 paise. They are able to produce at the rate of 3 rupees. They get a 3 rupee 35 paise gain. After that, they pay 85 paise to DISCOM, and balance is a benefit for them, and they go for it. DISCOM also, since they are getting compensated by way of network charges, they are also now started allowing it. Earlier, they were hesitant to allow renewables for the captive, that is industries. Now in this policy, what we have brought in is, even for domestic, we have allowed network, that is net metering concept. Domestic consumption is only during evening hours. So we have allowed them to generate during daytime and consume during the entire period. Entire consumption they can plan for from the solar power plant. But whereas for other categories, we have introduced net feed-in system. That is, during generation time, they can avail fully. Other period, if they pump in power, they will get only the fixed tariff of 3 rupee 10 paise or 3 rupee 50 paise. We have fixed a tariff, net feed-in system. Whatever they export, they get a tariff rate. Whatever they import, they pay the tariff fixed by the commission for regular industrial tariff or commercial tariff, whatever it is. But everybody has to pay the network charges. So the discoms were allowing now. After the enactment of that policy, nearly 300 megawatt is added during this past 4-6 months. Near 300 megawatt rooftop system has added in the grid. So we need to have a proactive policies to promote this. The problem in this renewable is mainly the intermittent in nature and how to manage the peak hour load. That is the main problem. So what we are planning in Tamil Nadu is how to meet the challenges in promoting renewables. One is gas-based stations, which can be started immediately, brought into the grid within 15 minutes. So we wanted to promote gas-based stations around Chennai, because Ennur, there is Indian Oil Corporation has established a huge RLNG plant. That is, liquid gas is imported and they store in huge tanks and they regasify into gas, and they have laid pipelines and they are selling it to the nearby industries and to the generating stations. So huge, nearly 7,000, 8,000 megawatt capacity can be used from that particular gas storage system. We can have nearly 7,000 megawatt of generation. So we are planning to have 2,000 megawatt of gas-based stations in and around Chennai to meet this increasing variable generations, to meet the evening peak hour generation. The problem with the gas is gas prices are not stable. If the gas price is $3 per MMBTU or something like that, then your variable cost will be around 3. If the gas prices goes 6 or 7, then the price of this unit per unit will also go high. But the fixed cost of the gas station is very less. Even if you go for a new gas station, the fixed cost comes to just 1 rupee. Now a lot of stranded assets are available in the country, which can be shifted to nearer to this gas availability. That is the Ennur area. If you shift it and put the gas stations onto the grid, it can be a best option to meet the evening peak demand. The variable intermittency of this can be met through gas stations. That is one of my suggestions. Another thing is pumped storage. In Tamil Nadu, we have 400 megawatt of pumped storage that was established, first of its kind in the entire country. 400 megawatt pumped storage is still running. That is actually, it takes during solar hours, we pump water from the lower reservoir to the higher reservoir. Evening peak, it generate power through generating stations. So we have planned in nearly one 500 megawatt plant is now coming up. It's a big hydro station is coming up in Gunda area. Ultimate stage, it's coming up. Another 2,000 or 3,000 megawatt is under investigation stage. So that is another big schemes we have planned. Then the battery storage system is yet to be only a pilot we are trying. It is in the initial stage because of the cost. So another one, what we suggest is shifting the load to the solar hours. Since the solar, we are planning to have more solar, and even the government now, Tamil Nadu government is planning to add every year 2,000 megawatt in the grid directly through the discom itself, so that their entire agricultural consumption they can generate through solar. So they are going on their own. They are not even buying solar power. They want to own their own plant and go for it. So another point I want to insist is shifting of the loads, peak loads to the solar hours. In that, we have small suggestions. That is some suggestions like shifting of the agricultural load to the solar hour. So what we plan is you give 24 hours in the entire grid, 24 hours supply even to rural area. Ask the agriculturist to use supply during daytime. So they will require the supply for 6 to 7 hours only. During daytime, they may be asked to use. During evening peak hours, there may be a restriction. Even a voluntary request may be made initially to not to use the pump set during evening peak hour, that is between 6 and 10. That is a major load problem is there now. Peak hour is only. So peak hour, that load may be shifted to the solar hours, one thing. Another one is having a EV charging. A lot of EV charging is coming up now. So what we are planning is you have a EV charging, everything all put on smart meter with the AMR system. Have a dynamic tariff. During solar hours, the tariff will be very less. During evening peak, the tariff will be high, so that the load is shifted to the solar hours. So, if such a system is followed, then we can have a demand side management also. So we need to manage the increasing renewable through these measures, like variable generating station, like gas station, pumped storage, then this battery storage, shifting of the load. All these 4 methods, I think we have to do it very seriously to bring in more renewable and reduce the carbon footprint. That is my suggestions. Yeah, another one, now we are investing a lot of money in RDSSM also for segregation of agricultural feeders. What I feel is where segregation of agricultural feeder, around 6 to 8 crore spent on one particular feeder. So he's spending so much of money just for separation of agricultural load. I don't think it is worth spending so much of money. Instead, see, what is the purpose of having an agricultural feeder? You can restrict the supply hours. Only that is the main purpose. So that can be done now with the smart meter. If we have a political will, we can provide smart meter to entire agriculture. How the cost of providing a smart meter to entire one particular feeder will be around 80 lakhs, 10 times less than feeder segregation cost. If you have an AMR system, we can just do load shedding. That is evening peak hours, you can switch off selective loads, huge loads, you can switch off whatever your need. You can do a great thing on agriculture load management. You give the entire 24 hours to the agriculture, they will not be bothered. They will be running their motor during daytime. Evening peak, you can switch off all agricultural pump sets. It is only a suggestion. It needs a political will, because fixing a meter in agriculture is not an easy task. In Tamil Nadu, it's very tough to go for a meter. But it will be a very cost-effective solution instead of going for a feeder segregation. Feeder segregation is practically not possible in a state like Tamil Nadu, where all agricultural feeders are having many number of industries, many number of domestic commercial services. It is very difficult to split the entire feeder into separate agri and other things. So spending so much of money on agri segregation is also, it is not a correct decision. Instead, we can go for a smart metering in agricultural service connections and achieve the benefits. That's all my presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chandrasekhar,
Thank you,
for
sir.
laying down the time. Yes.
Thank you, sir.
For laying down the program of the Tamil Nadu. In fact, hearty congratulations to you, because Tamil Nadu has traveled from power deficit state to the power surplus state. India Energy Forum was organizing with the Madras Chamber of Commerce Industry every year the program in Chennai. Unfortunately, because of the COVID, we had organized first only 2 webinars, but we are yet to organize the webinar for this year. So thank you very much, laying down the roadmap for how the renewable energy is being developed in Tamil Nadu. In fact, Tamil Nadu was the leader in establishing windmills, and all the other states have taken from the Tamil Nadu. Okay. So thank you very much for joining, and thank you very much for accepting our request to join and give your views relating to Tamil Nadu. Thank you very much. May I now proceed further and request Mr. Sagal, ED Greenco Company Group, to give his viewpoints as the industry.
Good afternoon, sir. As a part of my address, I made few of the slides basically just to address issues, because a lot of work has been done on the regulatory aspect looking into different aspects of regulations, looking into the need of the Indian grid, looking into need of the decarbonization. However, with my background as a CO, CTU, and as well as now working in a private sector, looking into both the aspect basically, and knowing well that there are the certain frameworks, certain limitation of working. So I make a few of the slides, sir, which I would like to, with your permission, I would like to address through these slides.
Yes, go ahead, please.
Sir, in regard to the greening the grids, these are the parameters which we all know that by 2030, we are looking about 500 gigawatt. And all we know that CA has come out that just to fulfill these targets of RE and having a RE target by 2050, 100% greening. One of the biggest need would be the storage basically, which is a well-known fact, which everybody knows that we know the storage basically. And CA also has already come out with a figure of say 27,000 megawatt and 108,000 megawatt hour by 2027-28, including the pump storage capacity. I would like to raise another aspect, apart from, as it is well known, the RE has its own issues basically. Another important aspect which we have analyzed for different state actually is that apart from the variability and the intermittency which RE generation is doing, there is a lot of flexibility which is required by the DISCOMs actually. So we are just trying to plot on the all India basis one picture that what type of variation is taking place on the demand side actually. It is usually find that the demand, the gap between the base demand and the peak demand is also widening actually, in the sense that it means more volatility and more flexibility is required. The DISCOMs are not looking a base power actually. There are a lot of increase in peak demand is occurring. Therefore, they are looking for how to fulfill this variability in the demand also. It means the DISCOMs are subject to two issues. One is the intermittency and variability because of REs, and another is because of the variability in demand, and that variability is intra-season, intra-day actually. And once we have intra-season and intra-day variability, it means they are looking for a flexible source of power actually. They are not looking for a fixed source of power. A grid looks for a flexibility actually. Through this, there's a next slide where I will just try to show that what it really means basically once we have, first is once we have a RE actually. In this, if we just see the black one, this is the demand. If we just see the demand of the 24 hours, but the red one, it's a net demand which is seen by the grid after the RE supply is come over there, and the net demand which is shown by the red curve, this will go on increasing actually. And you may kindly see that because of this net demand, because of the duck curve coming over there, the thermal, which is the top actually, the PLF of the coal-based plants, they may go by. This is the analysis we have done for 24. We have done the analysis for 2030 also basically, where this net duck curve will go. You may kindly see that during the solar hours, the coal PLF may go as low as 18-19%, and which will require to ramp up during the peak time basically to the PLF of say about 78% or 74%, which is not possible with a coal machine. One is that there is a technical limitations for ramping down, ramping up. Second part is, though the country has a thermal capacity, we are ramping down because we want to do the RE integration. It means there is a energy requirement in the grid actually, in the system actually. Now this energy, if we just shift from daytime to the evening time, and the shifting is the natural sources through the storage actually. We have come out with an analysis that if we shift this energy, we can maintain an average PLF of the coal plant so that there will be less variation for ramping down and ramping up, which will not affect the machines, thermal machines. They can run more on a base load generation. With this analysis, we have tried to work out that the storage requirement by 24 will be about 300 gigawatt hour. More important in this graph, it is that most of the time we say the peak hour is the 4 hour. It is not a question of peak hour of 4 hour. It is a question of how much hour for charging and how much hour for discharging we require. We just see that when the solar is picking up from morning till evening, that is the time when the generation is ramping down. At that time, we require to charge it. It means the charging hour is also from 7 o'clock to say 1 o'clock. It's a 6-hour charging. And from 1 o'clock onwards, when the solar start coming down and the peak demand start picking up, this hour is again 6 hours. It means we are generally find analysis that as we go on adding the solar and RE into grid, the number of hours the storage charging and discharging will be to the quantum of 6 hours. It is not only the peak hour where we require charging and discharging, because it will match with the increase of solar and coming down of solar. That is a broad analysis, though there is a lot of sensitivity in these figures, because it depends upon how much RE capacity addition take place, how much is availability of thermal stations, how much is the demand picks up. There are a lot of sensitivity to it. This is a base figure which we are trying to out of. Next. Sir, in this, we have taken one typical demand profile of a state, because in the earlier slide, I was just trying to tell why there is a need of energy shifting. But now I am just trying to tell through this graph is that a state like Rajasthan, who have done the shifting of the load during the solar time, therefore we may see that during winter days, the demand of the Rajasthan is more during the solar time. It is because they have shifted the load actually. In spite of they take such a measures of shifting a load, there is a lot of variability during intraday and inter-season basically. The winter demand curve and the summer demand curve and the monsoon demand curve, they are all different. Their peak times are different basically. This is what we are trying to show, the variability and flexibility. Now, what it results basically, this variability and flexibility along with the solar addition, what it result into do it. Next slide. So if you see on the right-hand side, this, it is a net demand curve of a Rajasthan. After, even the demand, the solar demand, even they have shifted their demand to the solar time. Because of the lot of solar capacity addition, there is a net generation which is seen by the intrastate generating thermal units. This is the right-hand figure is what type of schedule Rajasthan will give to intrastate generating station, which are mostly thermal actually. It means this thermal generating station need to vary matching with this, because this net curve has come as a result of all demand and the generation of Rajasthan, which is very difficult because as the time passes, as this duck curve becomes more deeper and deeper, it may become very difficult for generating station to come down this one. Now, what are the solutions basically? The solution for that is certainly we required flexibility into, one is we required energy shifting, another is we required the source should be such which is so flexible, so schedulable and dispatchable that it matches with the demand. Therefore, if it means now our Indian system basically is facing two challenges. One is on one side, we have a compulsion for a greening because of the climate compulsion. On the other hand, because we have now come out with a scenario where there was an energy surplus or energy, at least sufficient energy was there, then there are natural variability and flexibility comes, how to meet these two. So there are very good solutions have come in the recent past, and those solutions could become viable because of because of the RE generation, quite competitive price has come out. Therefore, because of the quite competitive prices of solar and the wind, which is available in the market, and if we add with the storage, it is giving a quite competitive price. Therefore, rather than, we are just moving towards that scenario in which, rather than only the climate compulsion, we can there is a opportunity to offer a flexible source of supply, where the tariff is more only on the energy basically. Therefore, the DISCOMs, while drawing the green power, they will be in position to take energy which is purely on the energy rather than on the fixed charges actually, because the supplier can provide energy just matching with the demand of the different state actually. Next. Sir, from these slides, I just try to show over there that what a different scenario which is going to come, and with the type of development we had been done in the recent past, there are a lot of opportunities to fulfill the requirement of the DISCOMs, matching with their requirement, and as well as have a more economic price. Because the recent bids of SECI, those price signals have already come that we can provide such a flexible and schedulable and dispatchable power through a very competitive price actually. Before going ahead, I will just like to brief that when I talking about 300 gigawatt hour of storage with 50 gigawatt into 6 hours, or maybe by 2030, this figure may be a double of that. If we have to meet such a large storage requirement, we need, because there has to be combination of battery, there has to be combination of different technologies of batteries, as well as the pump storage, because pump storage is coming out to be a very good solution basically, along with the battery actually, because both has its own applications basically. Like in case of pump storage, like our company is coming out with the first very large pump storage capacity at the Kurnool in Andhra Pradesh, which will be connected to the national grid. Because if we plan pump storage all over the country along with the battery, both the technology has to go side by side. The biggest advantage is because Indian grid at presently is a quite strong grid, and there is a lot of capacity among different parts of the country. If we connect the large capacity of pump storage to the national grid, and enable charging and discharging of the RE power available in different part of the country and supplying to different part of the country, this can be a very big good solution for integration of RE and providing a flexible and dispatchable power at a very competitive price actually. But apart from this energy supply and the demand side, I will just try to cover what has been done in the past basically, and what the as a developer aspect, what are the few more things are required. But one thing I will try to appreciate, because I have been in with the background of CTU as well as in the private development, there are a lot of work in the past has been done by the regulatory commissions. Very positive things has been carried out. I will just like to give a few of the summaries basically. For a renewable, like we can go to the next slide. Recently this connectivity and general network access to the interstate regulation has come. Another regulation, CRC Ancillary Service Regulation 2022 has come. DSM regulation has also draft has been come. In the 2020, a sharing of interstate regulation charges and losses regulation came. Then of the REC, just recently being notified. These are the regulation. If we see there had been a lot of new provisions has been added, and all those new provisions are to create a flexibility of, a lot of flexibility has been given to the developers, and a lot of issues which emerge while developing a transmission schemes has been tried to cover in this draft GNA regulation and also another regulation. I would just try to give slide summary of these regulations and what type of sport we as a developer we are looking for. Though this draft GNA regulation is very innovative approach for regulating IST's development, because it is do away with point-to-point access approach. Like so far in the past regulation, each transmission planning was on the basis of the source and the beneficiary. Beneficiary may be a target basically, but this approach has been do away, because both generation planning, site planning, and the withdrawal site planning both has been being not linked with each other. That is one very innovative approach has been taken in the GNA. And like generation connectivity is the deemed GNA, which is independent of GNA of drawing entity. And to encourage RE, the biggest thing which I find in this GNA regulation is a lot of flexibility has been created to accommodate different structures. Because with the RE, I find now as RE new models are coming, RE with storage, the issue is coming that the different developers are looking for different structures of their organization basically. And those need has come because of the financing requirements. Because if we have a solar, if we have a wind, if we have a storage, all three type of financing institution may be of different type actually. Like this, therefore, a lot of flexibility a developer is looking for, while granting connectivity and while implementing those projects actually. And to encourage such type of development, a lot of flexibility has been created in this regulation. And there is a lot of provisions are there to accommodate energy storage as standalone, as well as RE with storage, because ESS has been considered that they are eligible for connectivity. And the transmission system required for energy storage, standalone energy storage, has no relation from where it has to draw.
Mr. Sehgal, please expedite.
Okay, sir. Sir, I will just push faster. Only thing what I say is, in spite of a lot of innovative done in the draft GNA regulation, sir, we still some sports are still required, because with my background, I find over there many times the new structure things comes over there while really operationalizing and making a development. What exactly happened is that once those structure are to be incorporated as a provision in the regulation, there is always a procedure basically. Our submission is that if more flexibility, and also the operator of those regulator, if they also have a more wider approach to accommodate particular proviso, this will create more flexibility. And also while addressing the new proviso, rather than going through all process of notification and it may spend a lot of time over there, and the time may not be available particularly to the RE developers. So there should be some mechanism in which if the new model comes and if the commission feels that can be accommodated, there should be some process of addressing and putting a new proviso in a fast manner. Though I'm saying regulators are quite open. We have been this is a very good opportunity for us that such a good regulations have come over there. But these are small submissions we have. Next. So just I will 2 minutes. I will just take like ancillary regulation. I will not brief what is given in the ancillary regulation, but only one submission over there is that is ancillary regulation. Though three regulator, the primary, reserve, auxiliary services, secondary, and tertiary has been defined. Very good regulation has come, but only small submission is it looks that because most of the charges, compulsory charges, are rupees per kilowatt hour. And when we talk about rupees per kilowatt hour, it means we are presuming that there is a generation surplus generation, unrequisitioned generation available, and which can offer this model. That is true. That is good that we need to take care of that. But the way the variability in demand and the way the variability in RE generation is increasing more and more, the quantum of ancillary support would be more required. And we need to incorporate certain provision which are based on the kilowatt basis, because any new investment comes over there. Certainly, no developer will include any investment if it is based on kilowatt hour, because ancillary services utilization does not depend upon the developer. It depends upon the system need actually. Therefore, nobody will like to put a new capex. Therefore, our submission is apart from whatever provision has been kept in the ancillary regulation, some provision for development of new infrastructure for ancillary support like electric storage by giving a provision by rupees per kilowatt may also be incorporated in the ancillary regulation. Next. So this I will not just skip over there. There's a detailing of that. This is what the need I am mentioning. I already mentioned over there. So next. Then also, sir, in DSM regulation also, this is the brief of DSM regulation. I can skip over there. But only thing is, sir, in DSM, very small thing is required because DSM, though there is a provision for wind and solar for the generation, surplus generation is mentioned over there. But there are many new models are coming in which there are wind solar hybrid with the storage are coming, and all are coming to the same ISTS point. Now there should be a mechanism for when the such type of hybrid generation comes with a multi PPAs actually, what should be the figure taken for the DSM? There is a very small modification which can be incorporated in this one. Next. So similarly in REC regulation which has been drafted, in which a lot of multiplier for technology multiplier has been identified for hydro 1.5. We just want to have a very small observation in this REC mechanism that because a lot of this pump storage will also come along with the pump storage is also like a hydro generation project actually. For them also, while giving this technology multiplier, we need to see that the generation which is coming to the pump storage, there should be a RPO given for that generation, as well as which is generation coming out of it, for which the multiplier may require to be relooked, looking into the investment required for pump storage and looking into the tariff of that. So these are my broad submissions, sir. And there are in that way, sir, I just try to give you the summary of whatever has been covered. A lot of good thing has been done by the regulator, but small submissions has to be incorporated to create more flexibility and to accelerate the development of the RE and storage components. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Sehgal, for giving the industry's viewpoint and the points which you wish that the regulators should consider. Thank you for a nice presentation. We will now move further. I request Dr. Rahul. First thing, Dr. Rahul. Dr. Rahul?
Yeah, thank you very much.
Dr. Rahul, first thing, I want to congratulate you for the very, very successful seminar, the program you had at Pragati Maidan exhibition, and this one. I was there, and the energy storage had a very, very successful program. Very hearty congratulations to you. Under your leadership, that program was there. Now, may I invite you to please give your presentation on this?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Bhambani, and thank you very much for inviting us for this important discussion and having a very key stakeholders all present for this discussion. I'm going to focus on the role of policies related to energy storage and EVs for low carbon transition, mainly I'll focus on the stationary storage. Just as a background, so apart from being founder and president of IESA, I'm also president and managing director for Customized Energy Solutions India Private Limited, which is a subsidiary of CES US. And one key advantage we have is that as a CES, we manage more than now close to 15 gigawatt of assets in North America, including now around 1.5 gigawatt hour of energy storage assets. And through that, we have learned a lot of experience internationally on storage, which we are trying to bring through to India when we are working through India Energy Storage Alliance. So here is just a quick snapshot of some of our operation center and the assets what we are managing in US. But now coming to sort of the policy aspects. So again, as a CES for last 20 years, we have been involved with many energy storage related to the policy work around the globe, starting with some of the work with NYSERDA, then with IRENA, the International Renewable Energy Agency, as well as US Department of Energy Resources for state of Massachusetts. And then in India also, we have done work with Tangedco and WRI on looking at role of energy storage for large scale RE integration. And we have also contributed over the years for many committees organized by MOP, CA, CRC, MNRE, and NITI Aayog. When we look at energy storage, we look at it as a comprehensive technology agnostic solution. So in my presentation, you'll see much differentiation between battery storage and pumped hydro, because what we truly believe is that most of the policies which are required for enabling energy storage adoption are same. And we can basically then let the economics decide which technologies get adopted, rather than trying to force fit policies for just promoting battery storage or pumped hydro, because ultimately it is all part of the same solution. And both technologies, in fact, other technologies including thermal or hydrogen or other mechanical storage systems can also provide many of the solutions. And ultimately it will be a competition between different technology providers for providing the solution. But ultimately this is part of a same solution mix. Now, many times when we look at the framing of policies or regulations, I think one of the biggest challenge which regulators claim is that there is no lack of data to quantify system level savings or benefit. And this is something which is strange in a time when we are now like going to doing smart meter deployment at an individual residential customer level. Unfortunately, most of the system level data which is available in India is very much concentrated with some of the PSUs or the nodal agencies, and it is not being made very easily available to all the researchers. And that is something which is perhaps the biggest challenge what we have faced in terms of pushing for right policies, because we have been giving many examples around the globe for last 10 years about how these technologies can help us in moving towards a cleaner energy transition. But every time the capital cost question gets raised, and the tendency is, oh, let's wait for another 2 or 3 years for the cost to come down. And this has been going on for now more than 10 years. And during these 10 years, the cost has come down for more than almost 4x cost has come down. So this is something which is really strange, that rather than looking at the value and the benefit being added in the system against the cost, we keep on only looking at the cost and have some imaginary threshold, and that threshold keeps on changing. It started with like $500 per kilowatt hour, $300 per kilowatt hour. Now people want to wait for prices to get below $100 per kilowatt hour, instead of seeing if you can get more value even when a system is costing $500 per kilowatt hour, there is a net consumer benefit. And those type of aspects needs to be looked at. And without having access to the system level data and transparent data sharing, it is very difficult for anyone to achieve that. There are many times there are reasons for doing sort of policy-driven technology development, and there are number of examples around the world in terms of related to the clean air, water, or the renewable energy adoption, where there are certain desirable or externalities of certain technologies, and you cannot basically capture all those positive externalities and then try to just say that, oh, I'm only going to compare it on basis of energy prices. So these are the areas where I think that regulators needs to be more proactive and need to understand that, okay, there are certain externalities which we are not capturing for incumbent technologies in terms of the cost, as well as some of the benefit coming in from the newer technologies, and that can be weighed in for pushing for certain technology development. There are many ways in which this can be done in terms of targeted goals. We have already done it in India for wind and solar, where MNRE has issued the targets. Now we need to keep on going and developing similar targets for energy storage, which is seen as a key enabling technology. And last week we released a vision document for 2030, which was released by Shri Ganesham Prasad ji and Mr. Dinesh Jagdale, of MNRE and MOP joint secretaries, and we'll be happy to share that with the August audience here. So if you are interested, just drop me a message in the chat, and I will email you the copy of the vision document what we have set up, where we are targeting around 160 gigawatt hour of deployment of storage by 2030. Now, these numbers may seem smaller as compared to what presentation was just shared by Greenko, but we are trying to basically not aim for the moon, but trying to set like a realistic target which we can achieve, because in last 5 years, we haven't even done 100 megawatt of deployment over last 5 years. So we are trying to set a realistic target for creating the industry. Now I'm just using a couple of slides for talking about how some of these things have happened internationally. So here you can see some of the regulations which started with Federal Electricity Regulatory Commission Order 819 2007, where it started opening up ancillary markets and demand response markets for energy storage and other technologies. And then actually different states and regional markets took the leadership in creating policies for attracting deployment. And certain regions like California or New York have ended up attracting a lot of investment in this area. So although many times we keep on working with CRC or central regulators for coming up with policy guidelines, I think there are many state regulators present in this August audience, and you have power in your own hand to drive actually adoption in your state, and not necessarily just keep on waiting for central regulators to do all the work. In US right now, there is a more than 1 terawatt of generation capacity, including 420 gigawatt of energy storage is currently in pipeline. So you can see that almost in every region, and especially regions like California, where there have been proper policies, storage deployments have been going up. And we have almost, I think, around 70% plus interconnection queue is of a hybrid or standalone energy storage projects in US. So here are some of the details, and you can see how the requirement is going. I think solar plus storage is clearly emerging as a winning combination. And at least in US, majority of the hybrid projects are happening with the battery energy storage. Although again, as the other technologies evolve, it can be with alternate storage technologies as well. Now coming to India, in 2012, we started India Energy Storage Alliance. In 2013, we had just around 15 member companies. As of now, we have crossed 160 member companies across the complete value chain, not just storage providers, but leading IPPs as well as startups, research organizations, various PSUs are part of IESA. And we have contributed a lot on the overall policy development and regulatory framework development over the last 10 years. And the development is in a positive direction, but I'll confess that I wish we have more implementation, because otherwise there are a lot of high level discussion which we keep on doing. And on ground, it is almost having zero impact in terms of driving the market. Overall, in terms of the market, our projections for like a cumulative market, including behind the meter storage is possibly 250 to 300 gigawatt hour on stationary side, and another 150 to 300 gigawatt hour for e-mobility side. We have started maintaining databases, and there are some examples like the AES Mitsubishi project hosted by Tata Power, or some of the projects which have happened in Pondicherry by PGCIL and in Andaman Nicobar, where we have started getting some experience. But right now I would say that this is like a very, very minimal as compared to the scale what we are talking about. If you are talking about anywhere from 150 to 300 gigawatt hour kind of a deployment, we do not have even 10 companies in India who have experience of working with even 5 megawatt hour of energy storage. So this is something which we cannot just keep on scaling it up at a gigawatt hour scale on just last year of implementation. We need to start focusing on doing lots of distributed projects. We need to stop just making announcements of gigawatt hour projects without having the capability to execute those. So we have even given request to NTPC that rather than just doing a 3 gigawatt hour single RFP as a first project, NTPC should look at maybe splitting it up into smaller projects and then try to see that, okay, allow multiple companies to win. Otherwise, it happens as a winner takes all, and only one company wins the project, rest of the companies shut down their activities, and the industry development cannot happen. We have released series of knowledge papers in this area, and these are available for free from ISA website, or you can write to ISA. I would like to highlight few things about especially ancillary services, because this is the area where we have been talking about since 2012. In fact, in 2013 with Shakti Foundation, we did more than 1 year stakeholder consultation with POSOCO, with CERC and all the other key stakeholders. And the report in 2014 was released by then CERC Chairman Dr. Pramod Dev, which highlighted the opportunities we had for using grid scale energy storage and stabilizing the Indian grid frequency. Unfortunately, some of the subsequent studies which came out from NREL or other agencies, we just looked at like a very high level 30,000 feet modeling, concluded that, oh, India does not need energy storage. And with that, some of the urgency what MNRE had on looking at energy storage deployments got lost. Also, I think as a POSOCO, we had this tendency of just looking at like a 15-minute average grid frequency and then saying that, oh, we are heading in the right direction, so we should just congratulate ourselves, rather than looking at the instantaneous frequency and really trying to see what benchmark we need to beat. So even with what has happened in terms of the ancillary service regulation, although it is a positive step, I think we have taken very regressive step where we are still trying to rely on thermal power plants for managing ancillary service requirements. And most of the requirements which have specified in the CERC recent guidelines are, at least our feeling is, they are specifically written so that thermal plants can provide those ancillary services. And there is no incentive for investing into fast response energy storage technologies for meeting ancillary services. So although on paper, CERC regulation allows energy storage to provide ancillary services, because of the way the regulations are mentioned, where for secondary frequency regulation, where 20 years back in developed countries, the time for response was 5 minutes. CERC has even right now given 15-minute time for response for secondary frequency regulation response, which is actually beyond my apprehension. I don't understand when we are facing problem where we have seen around the world that fast response can help you reduce the requirement of ancillary services in the grid and save huge amount of money for consumers. Why we keep on insisting that we want to just keep on meeting limitations of existing thermal plants and sabotage the requirement of ancillary services? We have seen it in US, we have seen it in UK, we have seen it in Australia. There are more than 10 countries who have gone ahead and adopted faster frequency regulation services since CERC has been looking into these regulations. POSOCO wasted more than 3 years in doing pilots with thermal plants and hydro plants to see if they can provide the frequency regulation services. And the conclusion was, oh no, these can provide synchronous reserve services, and they have not even covered the real requirement of frequency regulation services in these pilot projects. I'm showing a earlier slide where we had plotted the grid frequency of 2011, 2015 when we released the report. Since then, CERC, when Mr. Girish Pradhan was chairman, has done special stakeholder consultation, released white papers. Mr. Pujari has taken a lot of time in understanding these issues. But right now, if you see the grid frequency of April 2022, you can see grid frequency is still fluctuating from 49.45 to 50.2 hertz. Now, this is something where 1 gigawatt hour of fast regulation service requirement could have stabilized the India's grid within a very narrow band what we had proposed, which CERC itself had proposed. Unfortunately, we have wasted last 8 years in just talking about regulations and not taking any action. And as a result, when we are focusing on now building manufacturing capabilities in India, with this type of a poor grid frequency, we are going to create huge barriers for setting up manufacturing in India. So we still have a time. If we strengthen the CERC frequency regulation requirement, it can immediately create an opportunity for deploying these advanced technologies. The cost has come down 4x, 5x in last 10 years. And we can, within next 2 years, actually solve this problem related to the grid frequency. Regulators need to understand this is not a luxury. This is not a optional service. Ancillary service is essential for providing quality power for entire consumers. And even if you shift entire cost of deploying the fast ancillary services, and you can provide it with anything. If nuclear plant want to respond, if coal want to respond, gas want to respond, hydro want to respond, let any technology respond to that. But coming up with ancillary service proper regulation is an essential first step. We have even done a lot of studies. I talked about Tamil Nadu study where we have showed that the Tamil Nadu regulatory commissions their own roadmap for renewable energy. If they add energy storage, their overall system cost is going to be less in every scenario. And this is a study which we have done now almost 2 years back with WRI. We have shared these results with all the regulators and concerned bodies in Tamil Nadu. And we are hoping that the state can take leadership in implementing these. The other simple areas is something like island nations. Like we have been like looking at these type of studies. This chart was created back in 2013, where in Andaman Nicobar, we are running entire island in diesel generation, where in 2013, we could have added solar plus storage and started cutting down on diesel. But despite last 8 years and maybe 6 or 7 different studies being done, this is one of the latest study which Seki asked us to do. Right now, there is still only 8 megawatt hour of energy storage deployed. And even the 20 megawatt solar which is deployed keeps on getting tripped because you do not have sufficient storage and the over voltage keeps on tripping this. So if we are really serious about a lot of the announcements, what we are making, then I think we need to really step up and start implementing these things. There is enough information. And perhaps the one positive learning we can take from what happened with manufacturing policy, where with Honorable Prime Minister's intervention in 2018, within the last 3 years, we have set up the complete PLI for many industries, including advanced battery manufacturing. And we have now almost 10 to 15 companies interested in setting up gigafactories in India. In fact, as IESA, we have set vision of not just 50 gigawatt hour manufacturing, which is a PLI, but 100 gigawatt hour manufacturing by 2030 and scaling it up to 500 gigawatt hour by 2035. But if we do not create demand side incentive, then most of this investment is going to go into Europe or Southeast Asia, and India will lose out on creating manufacturing ecosystem, and we'll keep on having similar discussion to what we keep on having on solar or other manufacturing, where why India is limited only to being an assembly nation, not a manufacturing nation. So anyway, with that, I would like to end my remarks. If you want to know more about it, you can visit IESA website or ETN website. A lot of free information is available. And I would request all of you to block your calendar for 22nd September, which is World Energy Storage Day, where last 2 years we have been hosting a global 24-hour marathon conference. So if you still have any concerns about energy storage technologies, or if you want to learn how these technologies are being deployed around the world, then 22nd September, you can hear from more than 200 global leaders on a single platform, and it's a free event. So you can feel free to visit energystorage.org and block the date for attending this. So I would say that there are many technologies which are available. Technologies are evolving, cost reduction is happening, but we cannot just keep on expecting cost reduction in the manufacturing side. The cost reduction actually will happen when we start deploying technologies, we start understanding how these technologies are operated, how do you optimize the life of the technologies. And for that, we cannot just keep on announcing gigawatt hour scale projects 2 years, 3 years down the line. We need to start doing 10 megawatt hour, 100 megawatt hour, 500 megawatt hour projects, which can be deployed in next 6 months, next 1 year, and have multiple such projects happening so that we build the skills and capability for developing and managing these assets. Otherwise, we are just waiting for a big disaster where we will put all our eggs in one single basket. And if something goes wrong or something doesn't go as per schedule, then we will be basically holding our breath. What is happening right now with coal and other areas, same thing will get repeated with energy storage as well. And there is enough international experience available, enough stakeholders are willing to contribute for this knowledge. There is no need for us to repeat the same mistakes again. So I hope all of you will play a key role in enabling proper regulations so that we can make India manufacturing, R&D, as well as deployment hub for advanced energy storage technologies for meeting our own clean energy targets for the coming decade. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rahul. Wonderful work your organization is doing, and I'm sure your suggestions will be taken care of. I now hand over to Mr. Rakesh to please moderate the question answer session. I think those who have any questions to ask, please raise your hand or send an indication. Mr. Rakesh will moderate it.
Can we have the questions from the audience?
Sir, can I, Mr. Rakesh Nath, can I?
Yes, Mr. Verma.
I have only three very brief issues. The one is RPO. We have been discussing and finding that the cost of the price of renewable energy generation is coming down. Initially, when the RPOs were introduced, the cost was very high, and we wanted to force this renewable energy to go into the grid. Can there be a consideration that we may dispense with the principle of RPO? If at all we have to do this, we can make it only an accounting procedure that each organization who is supposed to have an RPO, while accounting, we can say that so much of dimmed generation, which is coming from the RPO, and accounting can be done. No need for so much of detailed regulations, etc. Number one. Number two, you also mentioned that the technical minimum of the thermal generation has been fixed as 55%. I remember that now, since the renewable energy is coming up, there is a need for bringing down the generation from the thermal generation below 55 also. And perhaps there is a scope of bringing down this 55 number to maybe 35 or 40. Can we consider this again? And because the CA recommendation, I remember, was to bring it down to 30% without any oil support. Number three was the merit order. Mr. Shahi also mentioned, and myself and many more people have been emphasizing this merit order can be deliberated more, and can the efficiency be introduced as the deciding factor rather than the total cost of generation or at the pit head, so that the transportation factor, of course, analyzing how much is the carbon factor involved, can be considered. These are my three questions.
Would any panelist like to respond to that?
वर्मा जी, इसमें जो merit order dispatch वाला है, if you take all the technicalities that you say, that efficiency and the transport cost and the transmission cost, because when you are buying on the spur of a moment spot, either you take it or you leave it. So you won't have all these technicalities.
No, that is not my question. My question is from decarbonization point of view and the national interest, and whether we are burning more coal or we are burning less coal, whether we are saving on our resources or not. That is the question.
Verma sir, let me respond to your queries.
Yeah.
On the technical minimum 55%, I think experiments have been done where plants have been operated below 55% up to 30%, but that requires very close monitoring and vigilance. And the coal quality issue is also a major issue, where the operators are not very keen to take it below 55%. In fact, the state generators are not even going up to 55%. They are going up to not less than 70%. So that there is a lot of margin available in the state generators also. So I think if some modifications are required to be done in the boilers to allow more flexibility, I think that should be allowed by the regulator, and expenses should be either passed on in the tariff, or they can use that flexibility in the ancillary services market and recover the investment through ancillary services market. On the order, I think Mr. Shahi has also already touched upon this issue in this address, and the present formula takes into account the efficiency But you are right. If there is a pithead plant with the with very low efficiency, it will come high on the merit order. So I think some sort of moderation might be required. I think that is an issue that is required to be deliberated in details, and detailed studies required to be done. What moderation factor we should apply to the efficiency so that the higher efficiency plant come little higher on the merit order.
One small.
The RPO, I think RPO, I think the time is not still ripe to withdraw RPO, because RPO is still a driving force to add renewable capacity. Maybe in future, maybe after a few years from now, 5 years from now, RPOs may not be required.
One small interjection on the technical minimum. Adani in their power station at Mundra and other stations have introduced a low oil consuming technology, and they can go on the reduced load, and there is practically no oil consumption. Similarly, there is a plasma firing technology. You can fire coal without any oil support. But the country has not paid enough attention to this because it is a Chinese technology and it has to be imported from China. There is some issue involved like that. So NTPC was to introduce in one of the power stations in there this one, plasma firing technology, but they also dropped the idea because of some consideration. I don't know.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions?
I have one observation, sir.
Yes, Mr. Goyal.
Sir, on the issue of fungibility of RPO targets, as you have rightly suggested, sir, we in JERC on our own have been advocating that RPO target should be fungible between various sources of renewable generation. And not only JERC, most of the regulators, we recall there have been several meetings, FOR meetings, which were chaired by Honorable Minister of Power and MNRE also, where both the ministries were there, and all the regulators have been telling that it should be fungible. There should not be separate targets for renewable solar and non-solar targets. It's not that regulators are not willing, regulators are allowing, but it's only the government. Still, we are not able to do that. We are still getting the directive that these are the RPO target, these are solar and these are non-solar. Still, it is happening. So my suggestion maybe from IEF, we can send some sort of, if possible, to the government that this should be done. Regulators, they are fully convinced that they are doing it. We in JERC, sir, we have gone to the extent of allowing our territories the fungibility against the government ministry's order, and we have been allowing them because in our island territories like Andaman, Nicobar and the Lakshadweep, it is not possible to have solar target because of the lot of coconut plantation. There is no solar radiation available. It's impossible to do that. So we have no option but to allow them. But somehow from the government side, it's not being appreciated. Regulators are fully convinced.
Thank you. Any other question?
If you would permit, I will like to ask one or two.
Mr. Bhattacharya, please.
No, I thank you, for your posting, sir. We could hear a very absolutely excellent kind of dissertation. I have one question to you. Is that when you are saying that the cross-subsidy surcharge did not be taken for pump storage, and it will also perhaps Motandays will be applicable to battery storage. The legal issue at stake is whether we treat it as a consumer or as a generator.
Yes.
I won't like to name, but there are absolutely diverse views among the regulators on that. I would request perhaps focusing on that, if you could have a kind of short dissertation. So that will be extremely good. And with Shahi Shah being there, who can prevent us from asking questions? He had been our boss in the power sector, coming from bureaucracy. So two questions are to you. One is your projection for 2050, saying that at least in absolute coal will have its play. I mean, my submission to this very august group will be that perhaps we are not taking into account the coefficient of disruption as propounded by Tony Shiva. I mean, I had been chairman of 2 coal companies, as you know, but I have a feeling that the coefficient of disruption in this sector is going to be higher and higher, and Moore's law will play a much, much tougher role on that. That is my submission, sir. I mean, perhaps, I mean, it is only, I mean, it's a small submission. I mean, you might, I may not be as well informed as you are. Third is on the cost of pollution abatement. When you are talking of merit order, we are talking of economic cost only. But the eco cost, which is being assessed in most of the kind of net present value, keeping the environment in mind, perhaps your forum can perhaps guide the government that there is urgent need to move away from this so-called merit order, because this merit order has certainly played a very active role, but it does not play the role of, as you said, sustainability of ecology. And there are other methods which economists use to arrive at cost. So I will like to leave that thought perhaps with the forum. Thank you very much for giving the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Bhattacharya. I think I have a very clear view on the pump storage and battery storage energy that they are drawing. I think they should not be treated as consumers. For battery storage and pump storage who are supplying power to the distribution companies, there is no problem. But when they are standalone and supplying ancillary services, then this issue will come. So I think in both types, we are only converting the energy from one source to one type of energy to another, and then again store it and resupply, regenerate again, and supply to the grid. So the pump storage is not using it for its own use. It is using energy for delivering back to the grid. So I think if we have to, as I have said in my paper, we have to take a positive and progressive interpretation. I think both interpretations are possible, but as I have said, that regulators should take interpretation which is more progressive, and that will remove the difficulties rather than create difficulties. But another problem, when you generate hydrogen for own use, for transportation and for using in the industry, that issue will come, and I think something has to be thought about it by regulators, giving them a special dispensation. Otherwise, hydrogen will not succeed.
Okay, I think last question from Dr.
Dr. Rahul, you have something to say?
Yeah, so I just wanted to respond to the previous two experts. So I agree with Mr. Sucheta that in terms of the interruption and the coefficient of disruption is actually going to be keep on accelerating because of the Moore's law and the pace at which the global manufacturing scale up is happening with many of the emerging technologies. And that's where, especially when we are looking at creating assets with 25 or 55 year kind of a expected life, we need to be cognizant about creating more sort of a regulatory assets and burdening consumers later on, be it investments on the transmission side with very low utilization factor, or be investments in large centralized plants, just because for a short term we are seeing a need for that. But we need to have a progressive view on how the technology, not just right now, but in next 2 years, 3 years, 10 years, is evolving, and how it can play a role, alternate role for that. And other aspect I just wanted to mention was that in terms of the economic dispatch or the merit or order dispatch, at least my view is that you are absolutely right that merit order dispatch, the way we are using right now, does not capture many of the other externalities or the positive or negative externalities in determining that. But having alternate mechanism, like for example in US, either the investment tax credit or production tax credit, when IPPs or the investors are receiving those benefits even outside the merit order dispatch, that ends up influencing the prices which are bid into a proper market. In India, unfortunately, the problem is that despite having 12 years of market available to us, there is hardly 5% of energy gets traded in the market. And even with that 5% energy, as soon as we start seeing any realistic price signal, regulators are intervening and tinkering with market price caps and those type of aspects, which is sending absolutely wrong signal. So instead of trying to see how we can go from 5% to 50% in the market, and by increasing liquidity, allow the better price discovery and efficiency to come in, for less than 5% or even less than 2-3% of the load, we are not allowing proper price signals to be passed, and that's something which we need to evaluate. And the
Thank
last
you.
comment I have is for Mr. Mukesh. I think he mentioned that in Andaman Nicobar, I think availability of the solar is a problem which, at least based on my own visits to Andaman Nicobar, as well as many discussions with military engineering services, tri-forces, which have looked at many microgrids in Andaman Nicobar, I don't think there is any shortage of sites where solar can be deployed. Right now, the problem is that only solar with diesel generators does not work because the diesel generators in Andaman Nicobar, mostly which are deployed, do not have the right control mechanisms. So you can actually look at solar plus storage, and that can help you decarbonize even the islands to a very large extent. It may not be 100% immediately, but you can easily go to more than 50% decarbonization of areas like Port Blair and others within next 1 year if we put a proper policy, and there is no economic intervention subsidies required. Right now, it is costing us more than 28 to 30 rupee per kilowatt hour for generating electricity using diesel generators in Port Blair, when we are subsidizing the diesel being delivered and not accounting for any shipping cost for the diesel which is being shipped from either Chennai or Calcutta port and transported 1200, 1300 kilometers by diesel powered boats. And that cost we are completely subsidizing. And despite of that, the cost is 30 rupees, whereas solar plus storage will not cost more than 10 rupees in the current time. So the either central or the state or the local government will start saving 20 rupees, help decarbonize and improve the environment immediately if the regulators really take a hard view on this. This has been the biggest sort of a puzzle for me, because last 7 years, there have been 8 different studies done by us, by TERI, by NTPC, by PGCIL, by IIT Chennai, as well as other bodies. Every study has concluded same thing. But for one reason or other, we do not end up following greening the grid or greening the island process.
Only thing, it's not because of the regulator, it's because of the several other administrative issues and the other issues. Regulators have already, all along, regulators have been supporting and have been insisting. And what I meant to say was that in the existing circumstances, I mean, just complying with the solar RPO target, that is not possible.
Okay. Okay, I think we can. Yes, Rakesh?
Yeah, I think we can,
Yeah.
Mr.
Thank you very
Shahid
much.
give his concluding remarks.
Thank you very much. I think we had a very good interaction. May I now request Mr. Sahi?
Yeah, mute kar de mere.
Thank you very much. I think let me
sum up.
Charge raised about you're muted. I am muted. No, are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. What I said was that the proportion of coal-based power generation, and in the coal itself, we are not talking in the sense of the method that we have been using so far. There is considerable pressure and considerable amount of preparation that is going on in the matter of how coal will be used for power generation. Maybe coal to hydrogen could also be a process. And so therefore, the technological disruptions would also involve coal being used both pre-combustion and post-combustion in a different manner. So that is one point. Second point which I mentioned was that proportion-wise it will go down. 70%, it may go down 70% to almost 30% in that range. And nobody knows exactly 2050 what will happen. But it appears that India is far away from the per capita consumption level. India has to grow. Compulsions of countries like India, particularly India, will continue. And then when we need to grow on per capita consumption, there can be no other solution, because there could be limiting factors even on solar or wind. You have a potential to which you can go. You have land requirement, you have so many things. So you have potential. So even if you take the potentials which have been identified and are likely to be identified, there is a number to which you can rise. You can't go unlimited number. So I think, I mean, nobody knows what will happen in 2040 to 2050. But that is one projection. After analyzing various information, one comes to that you will still have billion units more than you are having billion units, because 30% of the total generation then will be less than, I mean, it'll be more than the 70% of generation today. So that is what Mr. Bhattacharya asked. One point that is emerging very clearly today, that this discussion, obviously it had to be a mixed discussion. It is not only a discussion on regulation and what type of policy dimensions the policy intervention the regulatory commission should do. And to that extent, it has involved a discussion on renewable versus non-renewable, etc., etc. So that cannot be avoided. One thing that emerged, and response of Mr. Pujari was very apt and very correct, that there is a need to, and I had also mentioned that there is a need for faster response, considering the fast nature of technological changes and the type of things that are happening in the energy sector. Whether we are fast enough or we need to be a little more on these issues proactively. And the point that Rahul made, he was very critical. He has been critical of almost everybody. That he has been bringing these points and nobody is listening, and then there's, I mean, so many things. So one strategy for him can be that he can be less critical and then still persuade people. So that is one that really we need to be faster. Our response time has to be better. And to that extent, all regulations of the CERC and the state may need to be revisited from the point of view of how do they reflect the concerns and the nature of response that is needed insofar as the urgent need of a progressive decarbonization of our energy sector happens. It can't happen overnight, a progressive. So to that extent, there is considerable scope to revisit and to that extent change as fast as possible. But I do agree with Mr. Pujari that the regulatory process is such, it is a consultative process. It requires hearing, it requires the views of so many organizations. And like just now, Rahul made a point. He was critical in his concluding remark, concluding slide. He says PSP is raising a doubt, whereas there are many who are saying pump storage is the right thing to do, and let's get back to hydropower and pump storage. So I think views could differ, and we have always faced that problem. If you have a renewable conference, renewable, you have coal conference, coal is the answer. So we need to reconcile. So to that extent, and my view also is that there is a scope today, even for pump storage. That does not mean every situation pump storage will be the solution. One has to study the economics of this, one has to study the location and to what extent it can be helped, and that can definitely happen. One point that emerged loud and clear, and I also made, but many of you have made that point. That is, in today's context, the way solar has come, this decentralized solar for particularly rural area and particularly covering the agricultural consumption during daytime should have become more extensive than it has become today. I am not saying it has not happened, as nothing has happened, but on a 0 to 100 scale, maybe 60, 70 could have happened throughout the country, maybe 20 or 15%, I mean, that sort of a marking rating you can give. So that is something which requires fast response. It also takes care of, in a big way, in a significant way, our challenge of renewable energy, variable load, the transmission system planning, etc., etc. That is something low-hanging fruit. I agree with Rahul that let us not have the habit of announcing big, 100 gigawatt, 200. Of course, he also announced 160 gigawatts, so he should also desist. Let us get into, can we have megawatt stage, 100 megawatt, 1 gigawatt, that sort of thing, and get going on the storage or various system of backup that is needed for this. I think the regulation on RPO, I mean, Rakesh has a strong view. To what extent RPO prop is even now needed? It is not needed because people have understood the economics of power generation. RPO came in the context when the power price of the renewable was very high. So I think view could differ. I mean, even if it is not stopped today or regulated today or moderated today, time is coming that this issue will have to be seriously considered, whether RPO continues to be relevant and to what extent and to what period will be relevant. One cannot say that tomorrow we stop it or maybe 2 years we can stop it. But obviously, when solar price has come to 250 or less, and even wind is doing well, do you need a prop of, when there it was, it's an obligation for the buyer that you must buy so much of energy. Today, states are becoming, discoms are becoming commercially more conscious of the thing, and they are themselves taking care. There are pressure on them to buy on an optimal manner. I think these are some of the points we will continue to persuade regulatory commissions, state commissions, to look at things. Today's thrust was on how do we progressively reduce the carbon footprint. And to that extent, the way subjects have come up, this seminar has been very successful. Right from the beginning, the points have been raised and responded to. Seminar definitely has also considered many of the planning processes which need to go into this. And I made the point in the beginning, I do believe that overarching, not authority, overarching expectation from regulatory commission in the whole scheme of dynamics of authorities is there from the regulatory commission. I do have a view that to a great extent we have succeeded, to a great extent we have not succeeded, because somehow we have remained very much preoccupied on tariff, and some of the developmental aspects need to be taken care of a little more than they have been taken care of. With that, I thank you very much for such a keen interest and such a good debate. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mr. Sai. Actually, on the pump storage, recently Andhra Pradesh government has decided to focus on construction of new pump storage schemes.
Yeah.
They have announced 29 schemes, totaling to 33,240 megawatts. So they a lot of experts in the believe that the pump storage will add up to the. Anyway, now we proceed further, and we are the last. May I request Mr. Singh Saab to please propose the vote of thanks. He is the convener of the group, and he is in US, so he has been, it is already midnight. They've been boarding there. So I request Mr. Singh, BP Singh, to please propose the vote of thanks. Thank you for waking up. You have been carefully listening the whole proceedings. And now after that, you can go to sleep.
Thank you, Anisa. It's 4 a.m. today, right now at US. Well, it has been a very nicely conducted workshop, and participation has been great. So I have been assigned with the duty of proposing a vote of thanks to the speakers as well as the audience and the organizers. So at the outset, I would like to first thank our chief guest, Mr. Pujari, who had really underlined the role which CRC has been playing in the setting the regulatory frameworks in decarbonization, and also had said that we need to have a proactive work rather than having a reactive work, and something advancement has to be done. Then I also like to thank Mr. Chandrasekhar, Chairperson, Tamil Nadu Electricity Regulatory Commission, who had highlighted what kind of initiatives the Tamil Nadu Regulatory Commission has taken, and highlighted what are the different issues or challenges which they have been facing and need a midterm as well as subsequent adjustments in regulation considering the kind of business and the taking care of the interests of all the stakeholders, not only the generators or the discoms, even the manufacturers and the consumers. Then Mr. Sehgal from the Greenco, thank you very much, sir, for giving us a really good insight onto the what kind of issues which the industry is facing and what kind of regulatory interventions or changes need to be introduced to support the industry to work and make it more and more affordable green energy. Last speaker had been Dr. Rahul, who has been, of course, very aggressive in his approach, but I would like to thank him for really making an eye-opening presentation and giving us various perspectives, what is happening in the world, across the globe, and how we can do much advanced actions to work for storage and draw a balance. And it is not only a technology-based regulation, but it could be a general regulation which can afford and let the technology compete in the market. Before I conclude, I would like to thank Mr. R.V. Shai, our President of India Energy Forum, who has been always a torchbearer in our activities and has influenced our tasks and makes it easy for us to conduct the conferences and has been a source of guidance. Thank you very much, sir. I would like to thank of this particular regulatory vertical in the India Energy Forum, who had actually at the beginning set the context in which the discussion should be conducted and what we expect out of this. And really the regulations have done quite that all the speakers have tried to move around the context which has been set up. And we have been able to get a lot of suggestions which probably can be summed up in our subsequent paper when we generate of the summarizing the outcome of today's and move towards having a more and more progressive and better regulations to decarbonize the power sector. Last but not least, I'll first like to thank all the audience who had actively participated and some of the participants who had raised a very relevant questions which have been discussed in great length. And then Mr. Bhamani, who has been conducting this conference, and he has really successfully conducted this conference as well. Thanks all and one, and including the persons who have given us all kind of supports to conduct this Zoom meeting, all kind of IT support and other administrative supports. Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Singh Saab.
I am told that Mr. Pujari is still connected. He is the chief guest who is there right from the beginning.
Yeah, actually.
I think very few people. Mr. Pujari, we profusely thank you because we have had chief guests who will do their job and stay for some more time. So you have really taken it very seriously, and India Energy Forum is obliged to you, grateful to you for 2 successive programs of the forum that you have been the chief guest and have continued to listen to right up to the end. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. It was very interesting and a lot of viewpoints.
Yeah.
All the points.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Pujari. Thank you very much. We are really highly obliged to you for your gracing this. Now this brings us to the close of this very successful webinar. And I thank again all the participants. And thank you, Mr. Anil Razdan. He also has been with the conference for the whole period. So wish you all the good afternoon today, Saturday, and have a nice lunch. Unfortunately, we are not able to offer you lunch because this is a virtual webinar, but hopefully we will move to physical webinars now, and there we can have the interaction and meeting together. Thank you very much. All, thank you, Rakesh. Thank you, Singh Saab. Thank you very much. We come to the close, and we have maintained the time. That is one great thing, that we fixed up the time of 1:25 and we are just 5 minutes. So thank you all the speakers and all the participants. Thank you. Thanks. Have a nice day.